Welcome, everyone. Hello to all of you to Australia on 99.94 Cricket. Every day, I'm Melinda Farrell. Joining me today is a weary Bharat Sundaresan. We'll be dropping into your podcast feed on YouTube or the 99.94 app several times every week. So please rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks for joining Cricket's conversation. Now, for those of you who are just listening and can't actually see Bharat, you'll see he's wearing a very plain T-shirt for him. We know that he's generally much more colourful, but does have a very fetching hat.
Well,
a little
it's a
bucket hat.
and the bucket hat is just because I was so sucked into the whole nostalgia the other day during that first ODI in Adelaide, Melbourne. There was so much talk. I mean, there was more talk, and I loved it, loved every bit of it, about how one-day cricket used to be in the 90s and 80s in Australia, right? It had such a charm to it, and bucket hats were a big part of it. I mean, they were less colorful than this one. And yeah, I got really all sucked into it. We spoke, at least on commentary, we spoke a lot about our favorite 90s players and guys who come to mind when you talk about the canary yellow. And yeah, my pick was Peter Taylor. Who would your pick be?
Oh, uh,
Like, what player comes to mind when?
for me, it's hard for me to ever go past Steve Waugh.
Hmm,
Dean Jones. How about Dean
Dean,
Jones?
Dean Jones. I mean,
Dean,
Dean Jones was the master, right? I mean, that's the
Dean Jones.
name that. Yeah. So, and you were there as well, Mel. Like, it had that feel, right? I mean, Australia were dressed in this really bright yellow as well, which added to the. And it was a beautiful day in Adelaide, so it kind of accentuated the yellow that they were wearing. And yeah, it had a feel. It had a good feel to it. I didn't expect 15,000 people to show up, honestly. So when I even drove into the parking lot and saw so many cars, I was very impressed.
Yeah, well, I'd heard that they had only sold 5,000 tickets, but then the members showed up. Good on the Saka members. And there seemed to be a lot of walk-ins sort of during the
Yeah.
afternoon and as work finished. That's the beauty of cricket in Adelaide when it's on at night time. People knock off work. It was just a steady stream. I went out to have a look a couple of times. So that was great to see. What did you make of the match itself? I have to say I feel a bit sorry for David Milan at the moment, because talk about, he's had such an emotional roller coaster, as the cliche goes, but what an emotional week, all over the place. Is in the side in the World Cup, gets injured, misses the semi, is probably fit for the final, but they don't want to risk him or Mark Wood. So he misses out on being part of the 11 in that World Cup side. And then he comes and he plays probably his best format
Hmm.
and and scores an absolutely stunning 100 against Australia, but they still lose the match. So that was outstanding for me. Australia look, it's like they just did what I kind of expected them to do.
Hmm.
They did look fresher. They lose nothing with Heady, as you like to call him, Travis Head coming into the side for Aaron Finch. And Steve Smith, it looked as probably as good, if not better, than he ever has in white ball cricket.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think Australian cricket needed to tick a few boxes that night or during that day as well. Like after the whole flat, um, I wouldn't say flat performance, but just the flat attitude from the Australian public towards the team as well during that T20 World Cup, and just how it played out for them not making the semi-finals. They not only needed to win this game, that they also needed David Warner and Steve Smith to play knocks, which kind of get the summer going. They needed them to raise their bats for sure. I was hoping for a David Warner century celebration. That's one thing that didn't happen that night. They needed Pat Cummins and Mitchell Stark firing on all cylinders, which they did with the new ball. I mean, Malan went after them much later on, but they bowled beautifully. Stark to get that in swinger in and getting Jason Roy clean bowl. So I think the Australian cricket needed a day like that to just get this summer going. Otherwise, it felt like yeah, we just sat there waiting for that energy to just come through, and I sort of it did come through. And you're right about Steve Smith. I think ever since he went to Sri Lanka, he just seems to be striking the ball so much better than he was even in Pakistan. Something has definitely clicked, and you can always make out with Steve Smith when he's feeling very good about his batting. The whole the quirks that come about, like in his batting, the mannerisms, uh, do they don't show up as much as they do when he's slightly more anxious. And we saw that. I mean, he's striking the ball beautifully, like he said, and just the rhythm to his innings when he starts hitting a lot of boundaries early on. And you spoke about David Malan or 50-over cricket being David Malan's best. I think when it comes to 50-over cricket, Steve Smith is one of the best Australia have ever produced. It's just that his test numbers are so great and his T20 numbers aren't the best, that people always focus on those formats and forget about how good he is in 50-over cricket. So I think overall, it was a kind of match that Australia needed to kind of wake up and wake everyone else up. And I mean, it was good to have Harry at the top of the order. And I think I'm sure a lot of people came in, the members came in to see him do well, and it was good to see him make some runs.
Absolutely, they're very, very parochial in Adelaide, as you well know, being now Adelaide's favourite son. We're going to talk a little bit more about the match and focus a bit on the captaincy after the break. So please stick around with us, and we'll be back shortly.
You're listening to Cricket's Conversation on 99.94. Whatever your team, we have the show for you on podcast, YouTube, or on the 99.94 app. We have India, England, South Africa, West Indies, and now Sri Lanka covered. If you want to find us, the best way is to follow us on social media at 9994DM by downloading the 9994 app or Google 99.94 on podcast. We speak cricket.
Welcome back to Australia on 99.94 with Melinda Farrell and Bharat Sundaresan. Just chatting ODIs. We saw Pat Cummins' first game as captain. There's been a lot of speculation, Bharat, about the captaincy with Aaron Finch stepping down in the one-day format. A lot of talk surrounding whether David Warner could come back and captain Australia if they decided to lift the ban, his leadership ban. Pat Cummins said it's interesting. Before we were there listening to him before the match, talking about how almost like his captaincy could be a temporary solution focused just on the World Cup next year in 11 months' time in India. Australia have got, I forget how many games have Australia got?
I think a dozen games before then.
Yeah, they've got 12 games, and it might now be 11 before that World Cup. So that was interesting to hear him say that. And as we were just talking about your fellow South Australian, Hede, I wonder, Alex Carey's obviously had some leadership roles in white ball cricket, but for me, it almost seems tailor-made for a head solution.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, a lot of puns with Travis Head doing the rounds on social media, especially after he
Oh, is
got
that
out.
because he got out on the naughty number?
He did, unfortunately for him. He looked good for more. But no, you're right. When Pat Cummins was made captain, my first thought was this kind of leaves the door ajar for David Warner to come in. Because Pat Cummins, one of the first things he said as you pour water all over yourself, I mean, not in that way, but just you just missed the mark as you tried to take a gulp of water. Speaking of head and naughty scores, I think sorry, I think I lost my train of thought there. With Cummins, if you saw it when he became Test captain as well, right? Last year, Mel, he said, "I'll be Test captain if Steve Smith is my vice captain," and he hasn't said something as categorically as that about David Warner becoming captain, but he was one of those players, one of those teammates who said he would be happy to play under Warner before he himself got named as captain. And because we know he's not going to play every game, I mean, just look at Australia's schedule. They go to play 4 tests in India, then they stay back to play 3 ODIs. I would be really surprised, even though Pat Cummins has taken a break from the IPL this time, to see him play all 4 tests as captain and then lead Australia in all 3 ODIs. I mean, the broadcasters might have something to say about it. It's just a really tough grind. And the Ashes, and then again, one-day series in South Africa and India before the World Cup. it just seems unsurmountable to see for him to be able to play all those games. So there will be the door open for someone to become captain. And because what David Warner is still on parole, at least his leadership, maybe he does step in at some point. I can totally picture that happening. But if not, you're right. I mean, Travis Head has age on his side. He's a few years younger than Alex Carey. He's been groomed to be a captain from a very young age, right? Whether it's with the Strikers or South Australia. So he's used to being captain. He was vice captain for Australia for a brief period as well in Test cricket. Yeah, and if he can cement his place in the side, and considering Australia just coming off having one opener have a pretty successful run as white ball captain, it could well be, we could well be heading into heady time.
I see. It's funny. I've been thinking about that, about Warner and the captaincy, and because I mean, I personally felt there was an overreaction
Of
in
course.
some ways. Like, yeah, it did go so far, but there's been so much talk lately about Australian cricket being on the nose, and the whole thing with Langer departure, and then people deciding that that everyone's a woke princess or whatever
Yeah.
that actually means, because God forbid anyone should care about the environment. But I think the conclusion I've come to is that the fallout, we're maybe seeing the fallout still long term from Sandpapergate, and the repair job on Sandpapergate, that the PR repairing that was done,
Yeah.
I think might be a bit more fragile than people thought. Because I had fans talking to me. It was interesting because I listened to what people say. I think it's going to be, they're going to have to take the temperature. I think it was probably the right thing that he has his captaincy ban removed. But will that be accepted by the Australian public?
Yeah.
And you don't want to knock something that's already proving to be quite fragile. So I think that's the decision that they're going to have to make. And I don't know the answer to that. Please feel free to tell us what you think if you're listening. But I do know a lot of people have been saying things like that to me.
All I'll say is it would not be a bad idea to make him captain on an away tour. Not a lot of Australians
Yeah,
watch when
yeah, exactly.
rather than do it during the
Yeah.
home summer. Yeah, I mean, if it's away in India,
Yep.
or I mean, how about making him captain when they go to South Africa next year and play those white ball games?
Oh,
What about? I mean, speak of redemption stories. That would be quite something.
that would be quite something. I don't think they would do that. I think that might be a little step too far. But
If they do, you know where you heard it first.
well, yeah, maybe that would be something, but it would almost seem to be provocative. I think it would be seen as quite provocative, and I don't know if they want to be provocative at the moment. Look, we'll see. It shall reveal itself over time, I guess. But we're going to take another short break, and when we get back, we'll wrap up the show because I've got to get to the ground soon and do some interviews.
If you love the language of cricket and want more, then head over to the 99.94 app and you can hear all of our podcasts and cricket commentary. We're adding new shows all the time and covering cricket series from all over the world. Be the first to hear all of our announcements by following us on social media at 9994DM. Welcome to Cricket's Conversation.
Okay, welcome back to 99.94 with Bharat Sundaresan joining me, Melinda Farrell. Just a quick one today because we've got to get to the game. So you're probably listening to this during the game or just before, maybe after. I don't know. We'll do another one after this second ODI. But on the subject of Warner, we were talking about the captaincy, but also he said some interesting things about retiring. I think a lot of people sort of expect players to retire from Test cricket first, say like Quinton de Kock, and focus more on white ball stuff, particularly T20. But we've seen Ben Stokes announce his retirement from ODI cricket, although there's talk he might unretire in time for the World Cup
Do
next
Serena
year.
Williams, maybe? Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Why, as you would say, why not?
Why not?
Why not? What about Warner though? It's sounding like he's going that way as well.
Yeah, and look, you're right. what the trend we've seen in the last few years is if you are someone like Quinton de Kock in your late 20s, early 30s, and not from one of the big three countries, if, India, Australia, or England, or if a country where your board doesn't pay you as much as the others, you tend to go into that freelance mode or start thinking about it anyway. So give up Test cricket and start playing more white ball cricket. But we've seen if you are on 34 and beyond, and especially from one of these three big countries, you kind of give up Test cricket. Oh, sorry, you give up white ball cricket and just focus on Test cricket because there are more marquee series that get played between these three countries anyway, right? The Ashes or Australia India or India Tour or Australia Tour or whichever mix you want to use. And if you look at where Australia are going in the next 12 months, they have 4 tests in India, 5 tests in England, plus hopefully the World Test Championship final. And then what's the motivation for someone like a David Warner? Because the next Ashes is not until 25, 26. And the next India Tour of Australia is not until 24, 25. So that's still a long way to go for that. What is interesting with David Warner is I remember it clearly. It was at the Adelaide Oval in 2019. After he made, I think, the triple hundred, or possibly it was after he made that 100. I think it was after he made that 100 against Sri Lanka and the T20I, when he was asked about his future. And he spoke this is before COVID as well. At that point, it almost felt like he would give white ball cricket up first, one by one, and then keep playing Test cricket till the very end. Of course, the whole landscape of cricket has changed since. So it was interesting to listen to him, 3 years later, in the same press conference room in Adelaide, talk about how maybe after the 50 over World Cup, he said, for me, the motivation is to play World Cups and win World Cups. And the 50 over World Cup next year is in India. That's just 10 months away. But the one after that would be 4 years later, where I would be 41. So what's the motivation for me to play in that? And similarly with Test cricket, maybe he feels after an Ashes and India Tour, 2 places where he has a point to prove, right? I mean, David Warner has a point to prove most times. Maybe he can get runs in those series and maybe play the home summer and retire. So it's interesting. And we all thought we had seen the last of him in T20I cricket after that game against Afghanistan what an end it would have been as well, right? He was bowled looking like a right-hander or trying to bat as a right-hander, clean ball, which would have been a funny end to David Warner. I mean, it should be the apt end because he came onto the scene, burst onto the scene playing switch hits, and for his career to end, if it had ended that day in that format, where he gets bowled trying to be a right-hander, would have been quite something. But clearly, he wants to play on till the 2024 T20 World Cup. And good on him. So that World Cup, if you think, is not as far away as the 2027 50 over World Cup. So it's interesting how different players have different views, and also how their thoughts about retirement and taking one format away also keeps evolving, even as world cricket evolves.
Yeah, well, we all know just how cray the schedule is. I was about to say batshit crazy, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that. But I said it anyway. But it is crazy. It is completely crazy, this schedule. And I mean, I think a lot of players will be assessing that over the next kind of 12 months because now we do have an ICC event every year. There's just one every year. I'm scheduled every year up until 2030, but I can't see them going back to not having one year. So, how do players do that? And it's funny when you think of the Ben Stokes thing as well and how that relates. If, you end up seeing really good players that just play basically in the lead up to a World Cup and not otherwise. It may be interesting how that might affect team harmony in a way as well. But you can see players doing that. Like I said, there's only, I think England only have 11 games or something like that left before the World Cup as well. So I think a lot of these teams have around about 10 games. It's not that many, is it? And they're not playing. It's not like they're playing list day cricket either. So it's sort of going to be quite interesting, and that makes this series interesting in a way as well because now we're going back to one-day cricket after T20 cricket. And stop playing with the hat. If you're just listening, he can't stop preening himself. He's checking himself out. He's like fixing his hat and putting it on a rakish angle. See, this is what happens because he's now Australia's favourite son, Adelaide's favourite
Oh
son,
no.
and he's on
It's just
TV
because
all
of
the
that
time.
one cute picture on Twitter.
Yeah, and you even sent me a text saying how cute is my Twitter profile. I can't believe how good I look. Oh, vanity, vanity. We're gonna have to do something about it. Look, I'm gonna have to duck off. It's
Mm.
only a shorter pod today, but
I think
we'll
this is
come back.
this is a record, Mel. You and
I
I have
know.
finished covering 3 topics in 20 minutes. Maybe we need to be under the uh, in a crunch situation every time so that we finish on time. This is very good.
Yeah, we work best under pressure.
Yeah.
T20 pressure. Look, we'll be back and we'll see what happens in this next T20. I'm still in T20 mode. And this
Mhm.
next ODI, if England have got the rust and the dust out of their system after being pretty convincingly beaten
Mm.
in the first ODI. So we'll wait and see what happens. We'll come back and see you. And look, I've lost my place. Here we are. Oh, that's what I have to say. Thanks for listening to Australia on 99.94, where we speak cricket. When do we speak cricket?
Every day.
Well done. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcasts. You can download the 99.94 app and follow us on Twitter at BeastieBoy07 and at Melinda Farrell. Never miss out. Join our 24/7 conversation on social media and follow us at 9994DM. Cricket, every day, your way.